So it's my honor today to introduce our guest speaker. Marc Greenberg has been the executive director of the Interfaith Assembly on Homelessness and Housing, if I've done my research right, since 1985, working for justice by involving as many stakeholders as possible. Since 2019, he's also been president of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, working to help faith-based organizations with property to establish affordable housing. He has spoken to us before at the Society, and he's here today to update us on current state of housing issues in New York City and to engage in conversation with our community on how we can be more effectively involved in these issues moving forward. And a bit before 11:20 is when we'll move on to our closing activities to give us an idea of how much time that we have here. So go ahead, Marc.
Thank you, Joan. It's great to be with you and to be with the community. A few of whom I've met and some I haven't, but I'm so happy to be with you today. And thank you so much for the music and the words from your community. It's really very inspiring to join you. And as Joan, as you said, my hope is that our time together will help us to be more effective collectively as we look to address homelessness as people and as communities of faith and goodwill, and really to mobilize the power of our moral, our spiritual, and our ethical witness and actions so that we can move towards a city and a society where everyone has a safe place to live. So I want to quote from Pasteur, who said, "Fortune favors the prepared mind." What I want to do is help to share with you my perspective and some details about work that we've done and work that is going on, so that going forward, when opportunities present themselves, I'll help you to be able to engage more effectively as needed. A little bit of history. As Joan said, our work started around 1985, and it's been an interesting journey, but we started out wanting to bear witness to the crisis of homelessness. And as I think was mentioned in one of the things that we read today, to really ask, is this the best we can do as human beings, as a society? Is this what we're called to do as a society? And so we would go to places where homelessness was visible, and we'd ask that question. We go to shelters and soup kitchens and drop-in centers and welfare hotels and ask that question: Is this what we're put on earth to do as a society? And then we decided we would ask that question when New York City was developing its budget. Because as we know, budget is a moral document. A budget indicates what we value. So we decided one night a year, around the budget deliberation time, we would go and stay overnight in City Hall Park. We started that in 1985. We actually continued it for 28 years until Bill de Blasio was elected mayor, because at that point we finally felt someone in City Hall was listening to us. But in 1988, what happened was we started with 400 people in a church, in actually St. Paul's Chapel of Riverside Church. We marched into the park. About 100 of us were prepared to spend the night. And we were confronted by a torrential rainstorm. And so of the 100 who started, 12 of us were left in the morning, and 6 of us were homeless. We had arranged to meet with some city council members that morning to give us an idea of what we should be aware of in the budget. Of course, at this point, we know you have to follow the budget through the entire year, but I was new to this then. So we met with some wonderful people, including Ruth Messenger, who then went on to become borough president. And they told us what we were asking, but what they said to those of us who were homeless was, but we're the 8 members of the council who care about homelessness. That's why we're here. You need to talk to the people who didn't come to this meeting. And the folks who were with us who were homeless said, well, we want to go back into the park. We want to talk to the other members of city council. And we said, that could be 30 days outside. And they said, well, look, some of us already live outside, but we were just told we can make a difference. And a light went off in my head. And because it confirmed to me what I really should know, that each of us want to make a difference. Whether you're homeless or whether you're a leader of a congregation or whether you're whatever you are, we all need to make a difference. And so this ended up resulting in a 200-day encampment in City Hall Park. From June 1st to Christmas Day, they were there every day. When it got cold, we found a place for them to live, stay at night, but they were back every day, engaging homeless people, engaging city council. The press called them Coxville. They call themselves Homeward Bound Community Services. They were there to help others. And out of that experience of working with these folks, we initially thought, well, we could be more effective advocates if we had people who were homeless sharing their story as we try to advocate for public policy change. But we then quickly realized they're not homeless because they're not good public speakers. They're homeless because something has happened to them. Some terrible trauma has occurred in their lives that left them with no option but the streets or the shelters. And so we developed a program that we call the Education Outreach Program with New York Catholic Charities to help people to heal, to help people develop a community and to share their story and to really get back on their feet. And we've since replicated that program on a number of occasions. I think there are about 12 of them now. I helped replicate 5 of them, and then Fordham University took over and replicated others. And we now have a community of over 1,500 people who've graduated from our programs. And we have learned so much from them. We've learned to see them as our partners. And we've also continued to go on to advocate for public policy change. But I just want to share that, and the song that we opened with today reminded me again of the natural compassion that, if we allow ourselves, we have for each human being we see on the street. That's got to be the motivating force for our work. But in addition to that, we have to be kind of Zen-like and see and use that emotion that we feel to help us look at budgets and legislation and policy. We've got to be able to do both at the same time. We have to deal with those two realities, that there are folks who need to heal. There are also policies that need to be addressed. And so I've spent the last 35 years of my life looking at those policies. And I'm here to say, at least in the last 10 or so years, we've had some great successes. It's hard to know that. And I'm here to kind of bring a sense of hope to all of us, because this community has grown, community of advocates, joined by people of faith, frankly, not nearly enough faith communities, but enough to have made a difference. But we've really seen some incredible successes. And so I want to share with you just a few of those, but also I want to tell you what's going on now and how we might be able to move forward in the future. So just stepping back about 10 years ago, a group determined that of the 20,000 households in New York State that qualified for supportive housing with support services, only 1 out of 6 were getting the housing, which meant that people were living in shelters, or in some cases doubled, tripled up, but not getting the support they needed to get back on their feet. So we mounted a campaign calling on the mayor and the governor ultimately to build 35,000 units of housing over 10 years. And we got a commitment from the mayor and the governor to do that. But then the governor put $1 billion in his budget for the first third of his commitment, which would have been 20,000, but he only released 150 million of it. The rest, 850 million, was sitting in the budget, waiting for an MOU, a memo of understanding. We said, that is totally unacceptable. We needed this money last year, and now you're telling us we have to wait for an agreement to get the rest of the money out the door. We're going to be in front of your office, in front of your New York City office, every Wednesday at 9 o'clock until you release the money. And we were there ultimately for 35 Wednesdays, every Wednesday, except 2, when there's a little progress. We said, we'll give you a break, but we're coming back if we don't see movement. 35 Wednesdays and some Wednesdays are very cold. This went through the winter. But what he learned was that we were not going away, that the community that believes in these things is here to stay. He may be gone at some point, but we were not going away. And ultimately, he included that money in the next year's budget, and we've since had great success. And the new mayor, the new governor has renewed that commitment, and the mayor has also. So it took a lot. It took about 3 years to get the mayor and the governor to make the commitment, but it happened, and now people are living in that supportive housing. Another recent example, more recent, under Bloomberg, the last year of Bloomberg, almost 30,000 households were evicted in housing court. The saddest part of that is that it's estimated that half of them would not have been evicted if they had an attorney. Half of the households became homeless. If they only had an attorney who could tell them their rights and the resources available, would not have been evicted. So when de Blasio came into office, he started adding money for eviction prevention, but a very strong coalition, the Right to Counsel coalition, with some very strong city council members, one who is now the borough president of Manhattan, the other is now the borough president of the Bronx, led the effort to pass the legislation, the Right to Counsel legislation. We've since reduced evictions by nearly 50%. Great success. Took a long time, but we won because it was the right thing to do. Another more recent victory was that, as you probably know, rent laws for years were weakened by the Republican Senate, but finally, when the Democrats took over the Senate, we passed the strongest rent laws in the history of New York State. They are now law. They don't need to be renewed. They are now law. Thousands of people have been saved from eviction because of those laws. And then more recently, just before COVID, we were trying to force Mayor de Blasio to increase his commitment of homeless housing in his housing plan, which he wouldn't do. But one of our council members introduced a bill that would require that for every housing project with city funding in any part of the city, 15% of those units would be set aside for homeless households. And that bill passed. That is now law. So we have made some great progress, and we can continue to make progress, but it's important to have the perspective that these things don't happen right away. They take a lot of time, and what they take, I think, is changing the conversation. I think it's so important, the impact that we have in standing up for what we know is right. And when we started this work, we began with the perspective that decent and affordable housing is a basic human right, that every human being deserves to have a place to live that they can afford. We may never get there, but that is what we need to be aiming at, what we need to hold in our hearts and in our minds. And I believe that with that perspective, we will continue to make progress. And let me just say, with the onset of COVID, everything is up in the air, everything has changed. We now see we can do things we didn't think we could do. And I'm very hopeful. I think last year, though very difficult, was a good year. And I think now with the new city council, mayor, governor, and a federal administration, there's so much that we can accomplish. And I'm here to talk to you as a community, to ask you to continue to engage with us, that we can accomplish some of these things. I want to say three more things of some recent progress, and then I want to talk a little bit about the challenge that we were talking about earlier with the proposed shelter on 666 Broadway. So, one out of every 3 adults in the city shelter system is now working, but they're in the shelter system because they aren't earning enough to pay for housing. There had been a city rental subsidy called FEPS under de Blasio, but sadly, though there were at least 16,000 vouchers out there, there are only 500 apartments citywide that could be rented for that voucher. So it was an empty piece of paper. Under the city council, just before the new mayor and city council took over, that voucher has been increased, has been enhanced, and now there are 75,000 apartments in the city that are rentable for that voucher level. That means if you're working a certain amount of hours, not too many hours, because you can also earn too much and not be able to be eligible for the voucher. But that means that many working singles, working individuals, working adults in the shelter system can now find an apartment that they can afford using that voucher. Now, sadly, there's also what we call source of income discrimination, which is the next level of effort, something that we can work on as a community, because some landlords will discriminate against someone because of their source of income, even though it's against the law. It's very hard to prosecute. And this is something that we'll be getting into going forward. Hopefully you can help us when the time is appropriate. But also the state voucher was just enhanced. And so that at the same level, which means that families, particularly families who are in housing that they can't afford, or housing that's unsustainable, in many cases because of domestic violence, can now get a voucher that will allow them to move into an apartment they can afford. Now, I just learned about a little wrinkle, which hopefully is being worked out, but it would have been the kind of thing that a community like this could have helped with. The law changed, the voucher level went up, but because some administrative boondoggle, the families that were eligible were getting the old voucher level. It was some conversation between the city and the state. Fortunately, that's being resolved, but those are the kinds of things. Sometimes we learn about them, the right letter, the right call, or the right demonstration, we can shift those things to where they need to be. And then the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of vouchers, federal government has also made 8,000 new vouchers, housing choice vouchers available to New York State, but primarily New York City. And we are now involved in actually applying for a grant. But I will say this, even though we haven't gotten the grant yet, to identify landlords who may have apartments that would be open to considering taking voucher recipients. So if anyone in our gathering today is a landlord, has an apartment that is rentable, or knows someone, please let us know, because whether we get this grant to do outreach or not, I want to be able to identify, well, we're collectively looking to identify 8,000 apartments that are rentable from federal vouchers. So with all these vouchers, means that many more people who are homeless or at risk of homeless will be housed. So just to say that we are making great progress and we can make much more. Now I want to take a moment to talk about the shelter that's being proposed. Again, during COVID, the city wisely moved people out of congregate shelters and into hotels. And they noticed, obviously, that when people have their own room or a double room, they're able to find themselves again. The work that we do with our with our life skills programs is invariably I meet someone when they get interviewed, and then when they go through our program and they begin to find themselves, they're a different person. You give people the right environment and they can finally get back on their feet and heal. And the city, what we demonstrated by moving people into hotels was that people have the capacity to heal and to really be productive. Sadly, some of the shelters that are being proposed may not be structured to do that. Just to give you one data point, there's a group called CUCS, the Center for Urban Community Services, known as among the best. There's none better than organizations that provide emergency and supportive housing and shelter. They will not establish a facility over 90 beds, 90 people. And why? When I asked the director, the ex just retired as the executive director, but he said, Mark, I'll tell you why. We learned that over 90 people and our staff doesn't know everyone's name. What that says is that the facility should be there for the people inside, not for the developers, not for the providers. And as my friend James, who graduated from one of our programs, who's on our board, wonderful man, has said to me, Mark, if there are no problems in the shelter, there are going to be no problems in the neighborhood. So when we engage in the effort to address the shelter being proposed at 666 Broadway, it is crucial, I think, that we make sure that that shelter is a human place, is a community and not a facility. And whatever we can do together to do that, I want to work with you on that. And as I said to John earlier, I know his leadership in the community, and I'm hoping we can engage with Senator Biaggi. And there's a limited amount of influence that she has, but with the right kind of pressure from the community, hopefully we can get that facility be a community, be a place where people who move in can live like human beings, can be full human beings, and can be part of the community, can be an asset to the community rather than be seen as a deficit. So I don't know how much more I need to say. There's a lot more that I can say, but I want to leave it at that and just say that we look to you, to the Ethical Cultural Society of Riverdale, as partners, for us to let you know when the issues we're working on, to tell you when we need your help, just to tell us when you need our help. And collectively, we can actually build a society where people are treated as human beings. And I just want to say that I think that so much of our thinking is affected by the whole scarcity consciousness, that there's not enough to go around. We know there is enough to go around. In fact, we know that when we treat people as human beings, they bring more to the table. They're not someone that we're trying to decrease the drain on society. These are people who we need. Whatever your religious perspective, we are here for a reason. That person is here for a reason. That may be the next person to cure cancer if we can give them a chance to be full human beings and recover from the trauma, whatever happened to them that put them in the situation that they're in. Homelessness should be a temporary circumstance, not a permanent lifestyle. And so we need to see it that way, and we need to make sure that everyone has a safe, decent, affordable place to live in. Together, I think we can do that. And I look forward to working with the community, the society, to do that. And I'll stop there.